It's a story I tell about Ramesh when he came to Maui, and we took him in Lahaina. There was a shop called Creams, and they had all these exotic birds there. And it was fun because they'd put a bird on your shoulder, you know, they sold them. And so we went there and they put a cockatoo on Ramesh's shoulder, and he turned around, he just jerked. He was like, you know, his big beak in his face. And I go, here's a man who's not afraid of death, and he's afraid of a tiny little bird. We all had a good laugh, but he used it in his talk the next day and explained that there's fears that naturally arise, just spontaneously, you see, and it's just the body's way of protecting itself. Well, you know, the old Ramesh story he used to tell, where he said, going for enlightenment is a lot like going for $1 million. You go for $1 million, you apprentice with someone who knows business, who knows how to run it, you learn everything, you work really hard, then you start applying what you've learned, start your own thing, you work really hard, you make your contacts, you put in your hours, you hire people, you do this, you do that, and then you look at your bank account and look, sure enough, there's $1 million. Let's celebrate. He said, going for enlightenment is exactly the same. You study, you meet a guru, you study, you learn what you need to learn, you go through, do your disciplines, whatever it is, you do all those things, and then the enlightenment happens. The only difference is there's no one there to celebrate. That was Ramesh's description of the difference between going for $1 million and going for enlightenment. I couldn't get through Ramesh's books, but I could listen to him talk a whole day long, and I did. But his books were like, for someone like me who's dyslexic, it was way too wordy, and it was like, oh, but that was his thing. He felt that people didn't understand Nisargadatta's teaching, and his objective was to be so exact that no one could misunderstand what he was trying to say. He would put words in there, and I would look it up, and I would go, that's not a word. And he'd go, it most certainly is. And I pulled out my dictionary, it's not here. And he went in the back and he pulled out his dictionary. It's this thick, an Oxford dictionary. He goes, it's right here. He was right. His English was better than mine. The actual thing, the actual thing they call enlightenment, that when it happens, it just happens suddenly, and it's a matter of grace. And it's just like I say now, seems like every talk, Ramesh said, the enlightenment will happen in spite of what you do, not because of it. Well, Ramesh, when I came to Ramesh, he considered me way too young for this. He was like, because he had dabbled, in spiritual stuff, nothing very serious. And then it wasn't until he retired and saw Nisargadatta, and then within a few years, that was it. So he didn't understand. He's like, what is your rush? Why do you, what do you think you're going to do when you get there? I could not be deterred. I was not a patient man. I'm still not. That wasn't my nature, and I wanted, you see, so. But it took Ramesh 3 years. It took me 21, you see. Because I wasn't ready until then. So, he was right. He was right. I mean, basically, it's like a chess game. And the fun part of a chess game is playing it. checkmate is anticlimactic. It's just the end of the game, you see? And that's what enlightenment is, checkmate in the ego. And someone came to India, I was with Ramesh, and it was their first time in India. And they're like, I can't believe it, all this poverty. The person was just freaked out because, there were beggars on the street and children that were hungry. And she was like, there's too much poverty, Ramesh, too much. And Ramesh looked at me and said, no, there's just enough. Everything in balance.